So what's the difference between the refugees that they're talking about here and those refugees?
I could guess. I mean, I think everyone...
They're white.
They're white. Thank you.
Why did the classification of these immigrants as refugees cross a moral line?
Well, the reality is we can't be ourselves in the Episcopal Church and take the step of resettling white Afrikaners from South Africa.
South Africa. The Trump administration allowed for a few dozen South Afrikaner farmers to claim asylum in the United States. Why is there a pushback?
It's about power and it's about voting. It's always been about that. It always will be about that. That's how politics works. They believe that the Afrikaners will not be supportive of them politically down the road. It represents an existential threat to their idea of themselves. It is against the modern left's MO, which broadly speaking really is just anti-white and anti-Western civilization.
Well, let me try to understand
it. A little harsh.
Let me try to understand it from a leftist perspective.
Yeah.
They allowed countless millions of people into this country with zero checks. Don't know who they are. Just come right on in. The citizens are held to one standard. Mm-hmm. People that are even waiting in line trying to do it legally are held to one standard. But if you can just walk right across, pay a coyote, a human smuggler, some money, risk your life and your belongings and your dignity and your possessions, come in here illegally, and you get all sorts of benefits. But that is to say, that was allowed to happen, as we can see with the Trump policies shutting it down. What is the true root, the first principal thought about why the leftists want to embrace this flood of humanity from the third world under the pretext that they are helping refugees find a better life?
I don't think they particularly care about the details. I think it is a very abstract belief. I guess at the intellectual spaces we'll call it globalism. But I think downstream it, I'll put the nicest word to it I can. They're maybe empathetically driven. So they have no problem expanding refugee or asylum laws to cover parts of the world that are just simply economically impoverished, which are really not what asylum laws are geared towards. Mm-hmm. They're geared towards political persecution and imminent threat to harm or possible death. And I think the regime in South Africa is a really good example of why our asylum laws do exist. It's perhaps one of the first examples of it in recent history, because I would argue a lot of the mass migration, illegal mass migration from the third world we've seen in the last many years was really just economic migration. Certainly in Europe, it was economic migration.
Well, if there's anything that somebody walks away from this conversation with, I'd want them to have a better understanding of why do the leftists think that it's justified to the extent that they are right now, as we speak, standing in Newark, New Jersey, across the Hudson, wholeheartedly supporting these gang members that are being held in an ICE detention facility and demanding that they not be deported. But in the same breath that they will chant support for those gangbangers that are locked up that are going to be deported, they will also decry that we're accepting white South African farmers from South Africa, ostensibly for the only reason that they are white.
Yeah.
So where is this dichotomy? What is it that drives the left to fully desire to bring in foreigners to America where there's diversity is our strength and there's no defined limit on how much diversity is too much, and then also for them to suddenly have a visceral reaction to these white people who are legally defined as refugees?
The left does not value or like their own civilization, whether you want to call it American civilization or Western civilization. So they do not think in the same terms that a conservative or a traditionalist or a populist would. I also think you could chalk some of it up to a white guilt complex, which I think with mainstream America is dead, but the left will still have it. And it's a bizarre combination of white guilt and actually tremendous ego, and like savior complex. Think of that meme of Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones, like being carried by a sea of brown people. I think that's what the leftist, because when I say a leftist in the modern sense, I think all of us probably envision a purple-haired white lady with too much college education. Sorry if I'm being too mean here, but
I want to know something. Because of this, in your opinion, it's almost as if that it's always been about race all along, and that everything else was just subterfuge or window dressing.
Yeah.
And that there may have been a sincere movement for equality, and when I say equality, I mean everyone is held to the same standards, and I think that is what we ought to aspire to do. And then but then there's been this race communist element, which I think is different. I think that the Americans that led the anti-slavery movement at the time of the Civil War, and I think that the people that led the Civil Rights Act, in my opinion, they sincerely just wanted people to be held to the same standards. But now it seems like that this is not the same crowd we're dealing with, that they actually want to exact some sort of revenge against white European nations for their prosperity and their position in the world.
it plays out domestically within America, and it plays out across the West throughout the European, American, Western world, if you will. I think that hits it. And I think we had 2, if not 3 generations of, you're really talking about the colorblind value to aspire to. I think certainly millennials, and I think Gen X as well, and probably baby boomers grew up aspiring to a colorblind America. Our naivete was the left probably never stopped thinking about race as a construct to sort of wage power.
All right, quick, let's wrap up this because we're running out of time. But where do you think these immigrants, first of all, do you think they're going to be needing public assistance 5 years from now?
Yeah.
And
South Africans?
The South Africans, are they going to integrate well?
Significantly.
All right, so rapid fire.
Yeah.
Are these people going to be needing public assistance 5 years from now?
Not to the level of most refugees that we've taken in, I'll say, the last 50 years.
So you'd say that they're pretty much ready out of the box to assimilate to America.
I'll tell you what, the fact that they waved American flags and had expressions of incredible gratefulness, that's something I have rarely seen out of refugees in the Biden era and prior. So that right there is a beautiful start. And, this is something that I believe will be a net positive for the United States of America.
All right, final thing. Where should they go? I mean, some would argue, one of my friends said they should send them to Long Island. I argue they should go to the Midwest.
Yeah.
What do you think makes the most sense?
I'm not just for them, but really everyone who's came to this country, it has always drove me nuts that everyone goes to like the coast and large cities where costs are prohibitively high for your families, for your households. So I actually think they should go into the middle of the country, into the farm belt, into farm areas where they already have a skill set that fits into those local economies. And so I would say Nebraska, Kansas, where I'm from in rural Minnesota, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota. These would all be good states.
All right, great. Thank you, Troy. I appreciate it.